Hello and welcome to this tutorial. This time we're going to look at sci-fi environments. I prepared some reference. As you can obviously see, most of it is from Blade Runner. A particular scene here from the old movie that I really like, in Tyrell's office. Also some scenes from the new movie. And of course a scene here obviously inspired by the old movie, the office of this new guy, new evil guy. And I'm not going to try to recreate the scene, but I want to take inspiration from it, also from the lighting, the materials and everything. And I want to call extra attention to actually the simplicity of the environment that we have here. It's pretty square, it only has a few columns, but most of its appeal, I think, is generated through the materials, the lighting, and we want to kind of riff off that. If you see all of these, actually very, very simple, very blocky. So we want to try to recreate that, recreate this kind of feel. And we want to, like I said, call extra attention to how we're going to do the very subtle texturing and the lighting. And we're going to create a few different scenarios to see what we can do with that, kind of like a fake, not fake, but artificial lighting, and also something that it takes into account a more environment lighting from an HDRI, because this kind of space is, I mean, it's inside, but it's also the outside features prominently in terms of the lighting and the design of it. So let's get into it. So I have my little guy here. In the startup scene, there's not much else except for a 1 by 1 meter cube, my scale guy, and just a plane, nothing else. So to get started, we probably want to build ourselves some blocks. So we basically, some building blocks, I mean. So basically we need some walls, some pillars, and actually that will do for the most part. But let's get going. So I have that cube here. You can also just make a new one. And let's see, there's a million ways how you can design a pillar. I like to make my life easy, of course. So let's see how big we want this to be. We can make this fairly big. It's a bit smaller. I'm probably going to develop the buildings and the materials and lighting all together at the same time, rather than doing everything separately. So maybe that's a good scale for our pillar, I don't know. Let's make it a bit bigger even. That's okay. I always want to make sure to reset rotation and scale, just so that any modifier, any textures are applied properly. I'm going to edit mode with tab, switch to the edge selection tool with 2, and maybe I want to bevel all. Actually, I want to show you what I actually have in mind to do. So I have this, and I want to go to the modifier tab here and add a remesh modifier. And I know I kind of want to have like a fairly blocky looking thing, not as simple as that, but kind of make it look like it's built out of like very, very square kind of thing, compared to like maybe something rounder that you would find in classic architecture. By itself right now it doesn't do anything because it's a block. So if you remesh it with blocks, it's just going to be a block. But if we actually now maybe bevel those edges here, maybe like this, and then go back, then we see there's something going on here now. We can change the octree depth, which will basically rebuild, remesh this pillar out of smaller and smaller blocks. So you see if it's like a fairly low number, then it's going to use huge blocks. So it's like basically, take it as like how pixelized it is. The higher this is, the smaller the pixels are, it's going to use to remesh, or in this case, the little cubes. So that still doesn't look like something too crazy. Let's see if we make this a bit bigger. So here we're now getting kind of what I'm after already really quickly without really modeling anything. So you can see how it's rebuilding this angular surface now, because you can see it's like bigger at the top than at the bottom. You can see how it's rebuilding it and creating these really interesting patterns in here. If you move this up a little bit, let's see. Yeah. So if you manipulate this object in edit mode, it will keep the scale and everything. If you actually scale this in object mode, let's say you make it smaller, move it around, and now you reset the rotation and scale. Oh, let me do that one more time. You reset the location and scale. You can see how suddenly it's going to look very different. So we don't want that. And it's going to be important later on. For example, if you scale that object multiple times and then you try to apply materials, and it's going to look all crap, and you want to do Control A and reset it to get proper texture placement, then suddenly your geometry will look different. So we need to kind of plan that in. And we want to get this pillar to a design that we like. So let's play around with this a bit longer. Maybe I want to have a bit of a base. Extrude with E, scale with S, extrude again. So you kind of see how it looks like this. Maybe that's a bit too much. If you hold the Alt key and press on the edge here, then it selects the entire loop. Just in case some of you don't know that. I'm just looking to adjust some parameters to get something nice looking. Maybe I need to increase this a bit. That looks pretty cool. Maybe if you go the octree depth a bit higher still, you get something more refined looking. Yeah, that's pretty cool. But here, this one, maybe it's too wide. Do it like this. That's pretty cool. Or if you go like, if you press Alt E, you get another option to extrude the faces. And if you say extrude faces along normals, it kind of does the extrusion how you're used to it from other programs maybe. Because if in this case we just press E, it just does weird things. So we don't want that. So that looks pretty interesting. So if we reset the scale now, it should be all fine. If we actually want to play around with this further, and if we're happy with the all-over design of this, and we want to just play with arrays and placements and scale later on, we can always, what I usually do is just make a copy, Shift D, and then in the copy I apply the remesher. So now it's actually, you see, if I press tab, I can see that this is now a proper mesh, whereas this one is still our original modeled piece of geometry with the modifier applied. So yeah, we can do that either way. And here now you can play with it, and of course you don't have the modifier anymore, but now we can do like, let's say, we can now use this as our foundation for the array. We can take this and put it away, not use it anymore. We have a backup of it in case you want to go back to it later. So now we can quickly make ourselves a temple, or I don't know, whatever it is, office of a megalomaniac. I have no idea. Whatever you want to use these guys for. Of course, you can use this for different pieces of geometry as well. Now we want to do actually an array to populate our scene with these pillars, and add a few. Maybe too many, maybe 10 is fine. Maybe it's too many. Let's say 7. Space them a bit further away from each other. Of course, they should be, in terms of numbers and placement, they should make sense compared to the scale of the guy. So not too close to each other, not too far apart, because, well, most likely they're there to support the ceiling. So if they're too far apart, it's going to look weird. If they are too close to each other, then they become more ornamental rather than functional. So you really need to think about how you want to, what kind of effect you want to have. So we have this guy, then we do another array, but this time in a different direction. So we want to have it along the y-axis, space them out. Oh no, not increase the number. I actually want to just have one copy, but maybe like this. And then, no, not that. And then I actually want to not have like a complete grid of these. Like I don't want to have like this complete even spacing everywhere, but I'll have these 2 rows of columns here. Maybe I'll make them completely square in terms of the spacing, so that they're actually same distance here as to here. But then I'll do a third array. And now, of course, because I'm stacking these, it will make a copy of this entire section here. And this one, not too far. So basically this is like a second set of columns. Place them roughly in the middle. We can make finer adjustments later. So that's kind of, we can take that as a rough layout of our scene. So if you see this guy here, so he's like standing in between the columns. That looks pretty cool. And now everything, like I don't need to duplicate this stuff like piece by piece, like pressing Shift D and moving it around. Doing it with modifiers allows me to do whatever, like if I make a change here, it's going to affect all of these guys. If I only need to apply my material here. So let's say here and call it, I don't know, called black, because I'm going to make it black. And now it's applied to everything instead of having to select everything and then going crazy. So that's pretty good. And you can also like add to these guys. So if you're here and then you want to add a cube, So you see it's now everywhere here. Of course, depending on how many objects you have, it's gonna become slower and slower in terms of performance. So you gotta keep that in mind. Also, the offset is relative, so it's gonna move these around depending on how big the object itself is. So if you want a constant offset, which we probably should do in this case, we can do that as well. Let's try that. How many meters do we need? Probably, I don't know, minus 16, no, minus 20. That makes sense. So now if I scale this, it doesn't really matter. For this one, we need the same. We want to have 20. And then for the last one, also make it, for here, I think we need something like 10. No. 50. Okay, 80. 80 is a bit too much. 70. Okay, this looks good. That's about right. So now if we actually have this here, and you see they're not going to move. So if you want to add something else on top of it, you can do that like this. Or you can just leave it. Okay, cool. So we have these guys here. We have the floor, but the floor is a bit not very interesting. It's just a plane. So taking note of the reference I collected and what I said before about a fairly simple approach to the surface when it comes to actual geometry and doing more with texturing and lighting. We do not need anything like crazy, funky, that is wildly complicated. But I do want to introduce some unevenness, a bit of movement in and out. And of course, I want to be guided by, well, fair amount of happy accidents and not having to model every single piece. There's of course time for that, but I don't want to do that for this part. And that's why I'm going to make a cube, and then I'm going to add a subdivision modifier. So I have a bit more geometry to play with, and then I'm going to go to displacement, make a new one, click, sorry if that was too fast, make a new one, new texture, click on this icon here, which brings me down here to the properties. And then here in type, I say distorted noise, and crazy things happen. Now I can actually leave it, or I can play around with it. But basically what I wanted to do is give me just some crazy geometry really quickly without me having to pull and push vertices. And then I'm going to go back to the remesher, and sticking with our theme of like pretty blocky environments, I'm going to go to blocks again in the mode, and now I have a funky blocky thing. And now I can actually scale this up, because I want this to be not only the floor, but maybe also the wall. And it gives me a nice amount of quite random ins and outs, but I don't necessarily want to have this much of difference between the point that's furthest inside and the point that's furthest away from my character. Let's see what happens if I now press scale, it completely changes it. So I might not even want to do that, because I'm not too concerned about the all over quality, the all over shape of this guy. I just need a bit of noise, a bit of distortion. And now I want to actually decrease the scale of this by a large amount, and so I have something fairly flat, but if you can see that a little bit here, it gives me a little bit of structure, but not too much. It could be some kind of wall pattern, whatever. I can also now go back, increase the octree depth to get more. I can also see like what happens if I change this to sharp. That could also be interesting for a completely different kind of wall pattern, but that may be for a different tutorial. Let's get back to that. The point of this really is that we want to have something not too distracting where it doesn't need to be, because these walls are not going to be the predominant feature of our design. But still something interesting where it's not just like a flat wall. You see here that on these edges, I don't know, the light could like get reflected, and it could just give a little bit of interest instead of just being completely plain. So we can take this and let's actually mirror this one over. Not in X, but in Y. And of course, now I need to move it out a bit. Is that okay? Probably okay. Maybe a bit too far away from each other. From the columns, I mean. At this point, maybe I want to... Let's quickly set up our camera. So by pressing numpad 0, switch to camera view. Make sure that under view you click lock camera to view. Under the output properties here, specify the aspect ratio and resolution you want. So I want to have this 239:1. You can choose whatever you want. And then you get these boundaries here. In order to maximize it, you can press the home key on your keyboard. Just need to make sure you click into the viewport, and now I'm here. So I can mark this guy, press numpad, the P rate on the numpad to focus on this guy. And now I want to maybe adjust the focal length. So I click here on the camera item, click on the camera properties and change it from 50 to, let's say, 20 millimeters. So we have like a good wide angle. Kind of frame it how I want to. Also, you need to change the clipping here. 100 meters is a bit too low. So maybe something like this. Maybe I want to move this guy. So in addition to having the gizmo, you can also press G for grab, and then you have it here, and then you press one of the axes to constrain it, constrain the movement to that axis. So in this case, I want to do X. So if I press X now, it moves here. In the beginning, I totally didn't understand why this was good or why it was useful. It just kind of felt annoying, but often it's the case that I have my scene set up, and like for example in this shot, there's no handle for X because it points directly at me, and I can't grab it. So in order to still be able to move this character without moving my camera, I can make use of the shortcuts. Because you can press S for scale, You cancel with escape. You can press R for rotate. And of course grab. So if I want to, example, move this character on this plane here, but not necessarily constrained to either X or Y, I can press Shift Z, and now I can move it only on that plane, but I'm not going to affect the Z axis, which is pointing up. So that's pretty useful. I finally got around to that. Took me a long time. So we probably want to have some scene like that. I don't know. The character somewhere here. And pressing 0, numpad 0 again brings you out of camera view. So I also want to have something interesting for the floor. I want to have this again, but I don't necessarily want to have it mirrored. So I'll get rid of the mirror in my copy, the mirror modifier. I say origin to geometry. I rotate it 90 degrees and make it a bit bigger. And use this as my ground plane. Need to see, this is like ramping up. Maybe I don't want that. Maybe I'll change my modifier to this and make it a bit less high. Like I want this guy to be able to walk on there without stumbling necessarily all the time. I still have my regular plane in there. Let's not forget about that, but I can actually make use of that in a different way. Let's put that here. So it has a bit of, right now maybe it doesn't make sense, because why would you make a floor like this? But again, it's kind of, I want it to be out of the way, but not completely boring. And also I need to see how far do these reach forward, because I also need a roof. Okay, let's see, where do we have the plane? We can move the plane, Shift D, copy it, make it bigger. Grab G and Z to move it up and down. GX to move it forward. Okay. Let's see. That looks good. Let's see, maybe a bit more like this. And we have our box. Maybe I need to stretch this a bit further to make sure we cover everything. Okay, so now we have something like a very simple room. I don't necessarily want to model more than I really need for this shot. So I always want to check in my camera view how far along I am. So this one also doesn't have a material. Let's assign that. Let's assign that. Let's just go with like a standard material for everything for now. And so now here, if I'll show you the problem that we're going to have in a second. I have this plane here. So this plane I'm going to use a different material. That's why I have it kind of like half intersecting here. And this material I want to be water. Okay, good. Let's always make sure we save. So let's see what we can do now. We have this kind of closed room. I have the back open. As you can see, the back is open to let maybe a bit of light in, but we'll see how that goes. So now I also need to I also want to close this off. Let me actually build that quickly, which is going to be very simple and very easy. Here's my camera. If you, with Shift A, add a new object, it's always going to add it where this little cursor here is. If you want to reposition that cursor, you can just press, you hold Shift and you click the right mouse button. And now you have it at a new position. And then your new object is going to appear here. I want to have like a stopper here, kind of where the roof is going to intersect with the whatever I'm going to have in front here. So give it that material, I'll copy it, and then maybe I have like a, I kind of need a termination point for the ground here. Let's position that here, and then I'm going to take that plane and just build myself another piece of wall. Let's move that in here. So it's kind of stuck here. Okay, good. Press 0 to see in camera. Okay, that looks fine. For this one, I also need a different material. So let's get rid of that. Let's say new, and well, we're going to call that something. It's going to be, I know it's going to be orange light. So I'll call it orange light. Okay, we're going to get to these guys in a second. I'll do the materials in a bit. It's kind of, it's not going to be completely, I'm not going to do all the modeling and then all the materials and then all the lighting. It kind of goes hand in hand. It kind of goes hand in hand, excuse me. So it's going to be a little bit here, a little bit there. So let's see. For the ceiling, I want to do something funkier. I want to put this water here on the ground, which we have on this plane here. You can see here. And I want to use that, of course, to give interest, to make like cool reflections and that kind of stuff. I want to go really low. I also want to, and I want to use that feature, kind of that waviness of the water, and kind of mirror that in the ceiling, in the part of the architecture. So we're going to have a very blocky kind of main structure, but then I want to kind of contrast that with like something very like, it's going to be artificial, but it's going to be kind of like wavy, and maybe it can move or whatever in the wind, and it could be of some sort of interest. And for that, I want to kind of use the idea of like the waviness of water and have that mirrored in something in the ceiling structure. So for that, actually, I need to lift the roof a bit, or actually I want to probably get rid of it for now. There's a big hole here. I don't like that. Let's plug that hole quickly. Doesn't matter if the rest sticks out. It's just closed here, so that's good. Let's see. I think maybe the walls are a bit too close after all. Give it a bit more breathing space. Yeah, that looks better. I need to plug this hole here as well. Good. You can see where it flickers here, where like there are overlap the different pieces, but it doesn't really matter. You're not going to see that in the render. Now this is a bit too long. probably have to kill that later because it's going to reach into our frame here, which is fine. So let's get back to that ceiling. So reposition our cursor, make a new cube. We're going to stretch that really long. I want this to go the entire length of my room. So let's put it roughly where it needs to be, probably here. So yeah, okay, good. So it reaches all the way. And basically I want to make these really thin because we're going to have a lot of them. That's probably fine. I always need to see it in relation to the thickness in relation to the character. I think this should be fine. And probably want this to go along the entirety of the room. So I'll position them and then I'll make an array here now. Not in this direction, but in Y again. And I need a lot of them. So probably want to space them out a little bit. Bit more, maybe 2. Let's see, maybe they become like one unified piece, which is not good. Let's put them further apart so that you can actually see the gaps in between them. Still probably too much. Let's do 6. They probably reach here far too wide. I just needed to go here till the end of the roof. Maybe have a little bit of a buffer zone here. I think that should be fine. That's pretty dense. Cool. And reset rotation and scale. No, don't forget that. Okay. And now I'm gonna go into edit mode. Tab, so I can have this guy here. And now I want to press Control R. And with the scroll wheel, I'm gonna add lots and lots and lots and lots of cuts. The more cuts I have, the smoother this next operation is gonna go. But of course, keep in mind that this is multiplied like 400 times. So let's go something like this. Then we don't need to move it. Press escape. Or we have 146 here. Maybe 120 will just do fine. Oh, maybe that's not enough. Add this. Okay, 130, maybe like just to 200. Yeah, that looks good. And now what we're going to do, because now we still can't edit this, because if you see, like, we have one of these, we want to pull it, it moves everything. And that's not what we want to do. So what I need to do now, I can leave this, but I could make a copy in case I destroy this, but maybe you should. So you don't have to do this step all over again if you mess up, because the next step is going to be destructive. So I'll apply this. And now I have all of this is geometry now, which is great. So what I want to do now actually is turn this proportional editing on. And then I go into this mode. And then let's see, I could select some faces. Actually, I just want to select one face. And now if I hold shift and move the and move this around, it will only move it on the X and Y axis like I showed before. But now we need proportional editing turned on. So I'll hold shift, move this around. And now if I increase my radius, I can actually move this entire thing around and can distort these areas. Can make them larger. Of course, the more geometry you have, the more difficult this will go, the slower it will go. So you can always change the radius by using the scroll wheel. You can make smaller dents, you can make bigger dents. You always should pay attention though that you don't destroy the flow of these elements. If you do something too crazy, if you push it too much in one direction, it will get destroyed. And you should also check that these lines make like a nice, like this one doesn't look too smooth. That these lines kind of have like a pretty smooth flow and don't disturb each other too much. Let's see how this looks like from below. Looks pretty good. Of course, you can make an overall pleasing looking piece, but in the end, it really matters what you're going to do, what is visible in the frame. Of course, if you have multiple frames, then it's going to be more important that the overall piece looks interesting. You want to have a mix of like quiet areas, you want to have some distorted areas that are points of interest. But of course we can do the same now. Like now we have kind of quite a bit of like interesting waviness that will catch the light in various different ways. But we can also do a little bit of course, moving this guy in the X and the Z direction. So we actually get some interesting areas like going up and down to play with the idea of that waviness of the water. So it's especially interesting where this thing hits the pillar, because that's where we're really going to notice it. So maybe you can emphasize the effect there a little bit. If you can't see the gizmo, you press G and Z and you move it around. G and Z, and you can move it. I wouldn't overdo this. I wouldn't do this too much, because again, we want it to be not like, I mean, it's going to be fairly prominent feature, definitely, but it's always better to be a bit more subtle with this kind of stuff. Okay, so now that looks pretty interesting already in the shading here. I'll add my roof again. And I want this to have a different material. It's probably going to be something fairly metallic. Okay, so now we have enough geometry, I think, to play a bit with the lighting and add some materials and really dive into the look development of this. Let's get into some materials here. So first, the main one, I'll just call it black. Okay, just make sure I'm out of my camera view. I haven't decided yet if I'm going to do this with Eevee or with Cycles. Usually in dark scenes, Cycles is a bit unpredictable, but let's see how it goes. Let me go into the world, go here, say use nodes. And for now, I'll just turn it off. I'll make it to 0. I'll maybe add an HDRI later. And let's see, but we don't have a light yet though. So we might want to, we're gonna light it using this panel here. So maybe we'll do that first. Let's go to object, let's switch to Eevee. And predictably everything's dark. Let's give it a second to load. You can't see anything. Cool. So we're gonna take this one now, called it orange light. We have this one. Usually what we would do is just add an emission, plug it into the surface, and boom, we got something. I want to kind of have that orangey glow from the reference. Kind of get it there. But of course now we have just this kind of glow. I want to use not necessarily an image texture, but a noise texture to get a bit of variety in here. So if I say I want to go over the Voronoi, I plug that into the color. Of course it becomes colorful, or if I plug in the distance, excuse me, it becomes black and white. So I can't really add any color information to this. Or I have it via the color one, but that is all funky, so I don't want that. In terms of the look of it, let's get some coordinates with the texture coordinate and mapping node. Sorry, I need to zoom in a little bit so you can see this better. And I want to not rotate, but stretch it a bit. I want to kind of have it like a, I don't know what it could be, like a, some kind of, I don't know, lava or whatever. Some kind of interesting light play. But you can see now it's black and white. If you plug it in here into the strength, it works. But then we don't have any way to make this stronger, which is a bit of an issue. So what we can do actually is using, or one way to do it is using a mix shader. So now it's kind of halfway between the emission and nothing. So make it easier to understand, I can plug in like black. So it's now halfway between this emission and black, 0.5. If it's 0, then it's all the way to shader A. If it's here, then it's all the way to shader B. But of course, now what we can do, we have this noise, we can have this control which way it goes. So now the noise texture controls where the emission node and the black node show up. And I have the power to control the strength of this, which is what I want. In order to give this, in order to control the pattern of this, of course I have my Voronoi texture, but let's say I like this, but I want to play with the contrast. We can use a color ramp, but we can also use something new that was introduced in 281, which is the map range. So basically, this one has a range from 0 to 1, from black to white in this case, and you can remap it. So that example, when we increase this one, it uses it basically cuts all the, or it remaps all the values to start at 0.44 in this case. So we're cutting out the, this is for all the white values. So if we're cutting out all the white values, only the darker ones remain. So anything below 0.42 is now cut off. Or if I cut off everything above 0.64 to 1, we're losing basically contrast. So this is, if you manipulate these on a black and white scale, then you're basically cutting off the end and the top. If we adjust these ones, we can control the contrast of this. So we're making it more contrasty, which is pretty cool. So you can add more, you can see how you can add the contrast to it here and make it brighter here. So it is more white and more black instantly. So that's a pretty cool way to control. Of course, you can use the color ramp node as well, but I feel like I have a bit more flexibility with this one, even though the color ramp node is maybe a bit more intuitive with its graphical sliders. But this is kind of getting me where I want it to be. If it's too dark, I can always go into the world node and bump this up a little bit. You can see how it comes in here. That's my water. So we can add this water, of course. And for that, I would usually use actually a glass node. So now it's completely reflective. It's cool. But I want to actually use another noise generator to actually get a bit of the surface going. So we plug this into the height, the noise texture into the height, and we have water. So let's make sure we map this properly on it, and then we can play with the scale of it. Again, it's useful that we have this guy here so that he can tell us what noise level is adequate. We need the mapping to stretch a bit of the, I want to stretch the water in the Y direction, so it's wider, and that helps me to make the water look a bit more realistic. So we have that. So we have a very nice reflective floor, and then we can adjust like how visible we want it to be. If you want to only have it on a part of the floor or the entire floor, that's up to us. So this is all good. We have now the light, we have this. Let's see what we can do with the general texture of the walls. As you know, I used a Node Wrangler plugin, which is already in Blender. It just needs to be activated in the add-ons. Just in case you don't know that, here the Node Wrangler, and then by highlighting this, pressing Control T, this will come up automatically, which is pretty handy. I usually use box mapping, so change the coordinates to object, add a vector transform node to map it to world coordinates. I usually change this to texture, and now we have a texture here. I don't want this to be in the color, but in the roughness. And right now there's nothing really on here. So let's open a texture. Where is it? Assets, textures, my usual texture node that I use for everything, which is pretty handy. Let's set this one here to box. Don't forget that. Okay, and there's already something going here on the pillars. We have a bit of a problem with the mapping on the walls because I did not apply the transformation. So let's apply this one, the remeshing. The mirroring is fine. Now I can apply the rotation and scale without it deforming. And now I can play with the tiling. So it gives kind of like this kind of tile look, which is pretty nice everywhere. Am I in the camera? Yeah, okay, I'm on the camera. This one as well. I want to apply the subdivision, displacement, remeshing, so I can just do that, which is pretty cool. Okay. Yeah, so I can see a bit of the floor. Would be nice to have that here. So you can see that I have a bit of the floor here, and then here's like some water. The guy's standing on the water right now, but we can fix that later. Then I can see how much tiling I want, how much of the texture I want to show through. And I mean, you can experiment with the textures you want to use. Use something sci-fi looking, or you can actually use actual tiles, or whatever you like. I mean, the roughness itself is already interesting enough. We can play with the some other settings here. We can also add to this. So if you highlight the nodes you want to copy and then you press Control-Shift-D, it will leave this connected, so you don't have to reconnect it. That's pretty handy. I think that's also part of the Node Wrangler add-on. So maybe I want to add this to, let me see. I want to add a different texture. Let's see if we get some funkiness going. Maybe whatever happens if I put this into the base color. Yeah, that's interesting. So I wanted to copy this mapping node as well, so I can adjust the scale of that other texture independently of the roughness texture. So that looks pretty interesting. It's very subtle, but that's exactly what I want. Maybe I'll adjust it later. For the ceiling, I want something metallic though. I want to copy this though. I can go node, copy, I'll just press Control C. Do this here, Control V, reconnect it to the roughness. So something interesting happening already. That looks pretty cool. And I can add the metallicness, specularity. I can make it really shiny. It's kind of what I want. I wanted to try and say what if I change the shading, like right-clicking, selecting it, right-clicking, shade smooth. Yeah, okay, that looks a lot better. And now we're getting somewhere. So that's pretty intense. I can see what effect that has. Maybe I want to add a color to the metallicness or the specularity. Change the base color of it. By the way, if you have readjusted your framing and you're kind of losing your camera frame, you can just press home again and it will adjust it and fit it to the screen, so you can see exactly what's in your framing. So now that's pretty cool already. I want to probably try an alternate kind of scenario where I turn this off and I have like an HDRI here. So I'll go on the world settings, add environment texture, connect that. Of course it's pink right now, and I have in my assets, I have a few free ones from HDRI Haven. Let me see what those do. Quite big, so it needs a second to load in. Of course, there's a house here. That's not what I want. In order to rotate this, I need the mapping again. Control T. And rotate on the Z-axis. Yeah, that's more like it. Maybe take the power out a little bit. Yeah, that's pretty cool. Now I'm getting a lot of light from the back, which is not so nice. Maybe I want to close this off. But it might also be a good time to check what Cycles is doing. Let's give that a second. Yeah, that looks very, very different. Looks pretty cool as well. You might need to bump up a few of the things here. You might to add some light coming from the back. That might be useful. But you see, you get a very different vibe from this compared to from what we get from Eevee. But of course, in terms of responsiveness and quickly doing changes and see how everything affects it, I definitely recommend using Eevee. I wanna maybe adjust the water a bit. Maybe add only a bit of strength to it in terms of the bump and not that. play with the roughness a bit, so it's not so sharp. Yeah, that looks better. Looks a bit more real. If we go back to our world, now we need to make some small adjustments, maybe make it even darker. That looks a bit nicer. There's still a lot of other kind of reflections coming in here, which I don't necessarily like. Let's see what a different kind of HDRI would be doing. Takes a few, it's like 300-400 megabytes, this HDR. I'll rotate it a little bit again. Where's the sky? Maybe we can... It doesn't really matter if we're horizontal right now. I just want to have the sun in here. Atomic. I'm not getting quite the vibe I'm after here. It's a bit on the dark side and the bright side. But let's see. If we're loading the other one again, you can of course use also a different kind of sky setup. There's this great plugin called Physical Atmosphere, which is great to use, but I don't want to make. I don't want to have like you guys that you need to purchase it in order to look do this course. That doesn't make sense. I want to play with the location of this a little bit, of this texture. Kind of makes a bit more sense with this pillar. Okay, that looks pretty cool. Yeah, that doesn't look half bad. It's still not, of course, not going to be the final. We want to adjust a few things in Photoshop, but with this blurry water, we're also kind of getting like a bit of a effect of the area here being a bit blurrier than the thing that's in focus here. My bloom is really out of control here. It's very high. I haven't set that down. Oh, that's a bit better. Maybe that's a bit too orangey. Maybe it would look better like this. So these kind of green tones here are a bit annoying. I don't really like that too much. But it depends really on the HDRI that you're using. You can still try to find a better... You can see how the reflections on the sides actually change according to that. So we want to see that we find something that we really like. Maybe this is a bit too saturated. This is pretty nice. Pretty nice sky like this. And you can also see how the reflections here, everything changes. So you have full control over what you want to do. Use a different HDR. Maybe you have some really cool paid ones that you want to use. The quality of those might be even higher. So now we have this little scene here pretty much set up, and we can also do like a copy of our dude and have him maybe like stand a bit further away. Maybe his friend is there. So we kind of get a bit more, I mean, we have the pillars to give us like an idea of the distance, the depth of the scale, but it maybe helps if you have another guy here. So we have this guy here. Maybe he is not Jesus after all, so he needs somewhere to stand on. I think I accidentally made a copy of this. So he needs a little platform, whatever it is. You can make something very elaborate for this. You can just make a cube, so now he's standing on something like here. Or we make it like properly wide, so it makes sense. A little bridge or whatever. So now we have already 2 different lighting scenarios. We can do something about this here. Doesn't look that fantastic, but it also doesn't look terrible. Maybe we can do something about that. You can see that actually when you look at it from a different angle, it looks pretty terrible actually. But that's fine. Maybe I'll grab some of these. I want the lasso. Maybe I want some of these and extend these out so that when I'm, so that when I'm looking at it here, it has like a little bit of a, it looks like there's actual geometry instead of a flat plane. Or what happens if I move this down? That also looks pretty cool. So we get the idea that there's more. Yeah, that is pretty interesting. Maybe if you do something like this, extrude it out. So we feel like there's more to it, right? And it looks really terrible if you look at it like this, but it's really, I'm mostly concerned right now what it's going to look like in my money shot here. Something like this would be cool. Get a bit of a angular thing going here. Maybe this one is a bit too dominant. In this lighting scenario, I feel like this texture is a bit too dominant. Maybe we can take it out a little bit. I use a hue saturation for that and play with the value. It kind of lets me adjust kind of how visible it is. So I just want to have like a hint of it. So for different lighting scenarios, you might have to do some other adjustments other than just the environment itself. So that's pretty interesting. That's pretty cool. It kind of gets us most of the way there where we want to be. So now what we need to do is, since we want to have, maybe if you want to have this kind of scenario, maybe what we want to do is add a little bit more interest to what's out there. I mean, the sky itself is already pretty cool, but maybe there could be something else that could give some interest to to what is out there. Maybe there could be some kind of subject. Maybe in our case, there's like a, I don't know, like a spaceship landing or whatever. It's like, just imagine something like you're like on top of a tall tower and you're overlooking like a big city or whatever. So I don't know, if you have one of my other tutorials about making a big city, maybe you can like copy that in here, and then you have like these guys looking over the city. It's pretty cool. Maybe it's like some super rich guy, I don't know, whose penthouse this is, and it's a swimming pool. Who knows? So what we can do is actually, yeah, we can stay in this mode. It's pretty awesome to work like this. So what we can do is, let's see, one thing we can quickly check is that if we invert our texture, is that going to look better? So right now it's pretty shiny. This one is pretty non-shiny. I like it shiny. So maybe we want to do something like, let's just grab this, and I just grabbed this and copied it, Shift D. Make like more or less a cube like this. Maybe we want to have like a little Blade Runner tribute. We can put like the Tyrell pyramid here. And then we need like these thingies here. To move these a bit away. Feel free to put any other reference of whatever movie you like in there. So now we have that guy here. Can move it wherever we want it to be. So we have like a little thing. Maybe we I wanted to bring like a ship in. So for that, we can actually do something pretty interesting, which is pretty handy if you've done a lot of 3D before. Okay, let's switch to here. And maybe we need a place to park our ship, so too lazy to do something new. I have my old pillar here. I copy that over, get rid of it, get rid of the original. And I don't want to do anything from scratch, so I'm just gonna reuse that. Because I really only need the top. So maybe like this here, check it in my shot. Maybe it needs to be a big ship. Yeah, that's totally fine so far in the background. I mean, we're gonna use some different shots maybe later, but this will be, I think, just fine. Okay, so now we can actually let's import something. So in my case, I'm gonna use something I did for my previous Patreon, the fourth one, the spaceship design. You can use whatever you feel like, even if it's not actually a spaceship or something. It's just that we have so many, or if you work with 3D a lot, then you must have a lot of assets lying around, whether it's ones that you built yourself or stuff you bought. And they're just lying around on your hard disk, and we should actually make a lot more use of that. So I want to just quickly show you how you can take something old and repurpose it into something new. So I want to import an FBX file because that's what I had back then. For FBX, you always need to make sure that you do not import the animation unless you explicitly want that, but I don't. So I'll import that. And here's my ship. If you actually got the scale right before, then this will be very easy and you don't have to deal with like massive files. So this is still a bit big. Let's shrink it down a bit. Let's see. Ta-da! We have a ship. But I don't necessarily want that ship. So we can change it up a little bit. I want to first of all collect all the items. I don't need all these extra things here that came with the FBX and came maybe from a different app. So I don't need that crap. I just want the pieces that actually came with it. I'll press M, make a new collection, call it ship. Did I get everything? No, I didn't. That's not what I wanted. Okay, what? Okay. No, I just want to put them into my collection. I think now I got everything. Now, I don't want to actually have everything so separated, so I'm depending on how the objects in your scene in your previous file were, you might have to do some cleanup or you might not have. So I'm just why is it not selecting? Okay, I'm just joining the objects that are actually just mirror images of each other. So I can work with them more easily. Are there any other ones? I think this part here I don't need. Okay, so I want to maybe still make a ship out of it, but maybe I want it to look different. I feel like I have this quite wide aspect ratio and I have this very like flat and wide opening. So maybe I also want to have a flat and wide or like long kind of ship. So let's do something interesting with it. Maybe like this. Here it comes down to like the kind of thing you like to design. Maybe the body itself is a bit shorter. So it's kind of like doing your own kind of kit bash, so to speak. So yeah, I want to have it long and pretty flat maybe we can, I have the proportional editing still on. So I just need to select the opposite sides and then make it a bit flatter, a bit wider. Looks pretty okay. Maybe a bit higher as well, a bit higher like this. And maybe this one is a bit too high. Let's adjust it. So we're kind of just making ourselves like a new ship. I don't want it to stick out like that. So we just trying to, the thing is, if you have something that is already well designed, something well designed you're starting with, then pretty much whatever you're kit bashing out of it is also going to be fairly well balanced, because the shapes and everything is already working. So you're basically just like rebalancing the shapes, making something new out of it, and that can save you a lot of time if you do it like this, because depending on what your task is, like for example for this, the interior, the environment is the main thing that I want people to look at. So having this ship in there is just kind of a bonus. It's not the main thing. I mean, if it turns out fantastic, then you can actually make it the main thing. That of course is also possible, but if it's just something in the background that just kind of gives your scene a bit more, believability and it just pushes it over the edge, then I think doing it like this is definitely the right way, I think, because you do not need to do something completely new and it costs you a lot of time. So by doing it this way, it saves you a whole lot of time, and you can focus on the right thing, the thing that you're getting paid for. So you see, like we made this ship look fairly different. Of course, it would feel still like it's kind of like out of the same family of ships, but it doesn't matter. That really doesn't matter. Let's make sure that we can edit this properly. But so we have something fairly cool looking, and we spent all but 5 minutes on doing it. And now we can adjust the materials a little bit, but I think then we're already done. Of course, I've done this I've done this before to prepare for the tutorial, so I kind of knew what kind of ship I wanted and which changes to make, but it won't take you that long either, I'm pretty sure. So let's see how this ship looks like. Yeah, it looks pretty cool. That shape is pretty interesting. I might use this for something else. And now we can play around with it. This is our platform. Maybe I should get in the habit of actually naming all my cubes and cylinders and everything so I can actually find it. That might not be a bad idea. But for now, this will do. So, and then the great thing is that we have this ship here. Now I can say duplicate collection, and I have another ship, and I can make it fly. Select all my stuff. Move it over. Make sure it looks cool when it flies. So let's put this guy in position. Let's make sure it looks okay from the point of view of our shot. I might have to move that other building. A bit. Let's make sure it looks cool. Yeah, I think I might need to move that a bit back just to have it out of the way. You can really see the silhouette of our ship. That looks cool. And this other ship, maybe I want to... It looks a bit boring if it's just like perpendicular to the camera. Parallel to the camera. Let's see. Yeah, let's make it a bit like that. That looks cool. Let's move that here. Maybe this guy needs to stand over there. I have full control over this. Maybe it needs to move a bit more, rotate a bit more, so we just get really cool silhouette of that ship. Maybe the other ship wants to be a bit further in the background, so we get at least a little bit of difference in scale. So it like took off in the background. Yeah, that's okay. Cool. So now we have like a little scene, a little story going on. You can decide to like model a landing gear, or you can just quickly bash it together. Now we have all these materials. I probably just want to go really easy on it. But I think the important things would be the lights. You see all the little lights come on. Of course, the benefit is that I already made these materials before, so now I don't have to take care of it. Maybe I need some quick material. Let's copy that again. Maybe we want to not have it be green, but I don't know, gray. Reset all the rotation and scale, just so the mapping is properly done. Let's have a quick look and how that looks like. Let's make sure it's nice and shiny. I want it to be metallic. Oh, upside down. What is that white material? Now we have a nice and shiny ship. Doesn't even matter, it's the same texture, whatever. Like a nice chromey kind of ship. Body, okay, that's a dark part of the... Now we have a really cool looking kind of neat little ship. Actually, this might look too cool. I might use this for something else. Okay, now we got these two in and we have something going on. Cool. So now we're actually pretty much done with the lighting and building of the scene. One last thing I wanted to try. is that I wanted to take our ceiling. Let's see, where do we have our light wall? Let me turn that on quickly. And then I actually wanted to take this guy, duplicate it, rotate it. I'm an idiot. So you press rotate around the y-axis with Y and press 90. And then you rotate R around the y-axis, Y, 90 degrees, 90, enter. G, and then press X and move it in position. And then we rotate it around X. X is 90. And why is it up here? Okay, it doesn't matter. I wanted to do something like, yeah. So I'm kind of partially obscuring the my screen here with that crazy roof thing I did. And that looks pretty cool, I think. And immediately we have like a different kind of feel to it. So I don't know, there could be like some organic like light shutters or whatever. Anything you can imagine looks pretty cool, I think. So we can move it exactly so that we have a nice silhouette of our guy, and we already have like a different kind of lighting scenario. And then we can, I don't know, if you want to like really, in this scenario, we can really bump up the light. So now we can actually, you can decide between Cycles and Eevee, depending on the strength of your computer, render times, and all sorts of things. You can decide which one to use. Sometimes in interior lighting situation, there can be quite a difference between how they look, how Eevee and how Cycles looks. So right now we have this one here. We might need to add another light from the back, so we just have at least a little bit of bounce light on these pillars. Otherwise, they're going to be too black. Of course, the Cycle's going to be, I think, look a little bit better in terms of quality. But you have to really think about that in terms of how long it's going to take you to render it. Not everybody has a powerful PC with lots of graphics cards, but you can compare it side by side. So they both have things, I think, going for them in this type of scenario. So here it's a bit weird that we still have the reddish tone and the bluish tone from the HDRI bleeding through, so which we don't have in Cycles. So if we're cutting this one out, we get rid of that, and we have a better representation of that. So what we can do in this case, if you want, you can just duplicate this towards the back. And now we're getting a bit of kind of fill light from the back. You can choose to make that in a different color. Right now we have it set to that. If you get rid of that and say new, call it blue light, add an emission. Oh, I think maybe this might not work because there's something about Eevee with lights that are not actually in the scene that might not work. So I'll add a area light, make it really big. That will work for us. And now it's crank it up. There you go. So right now you can see we have a little bit of fill light. I think this is just good. So we can make that cooler if you want, to just kind of have a contrast between these two materials, right? It's a bit too saturated. It's maybe a bit too much. So just so that it gives these pillars a bit of 3D, a bit of form, we can do that. Okay, so now what we can do is play around with the camera and try to get some interesting shots. Now I want to capture some cool images, and for that I need to render out a few frames, and of course I have to think a bit about cameras and framing. So it would be good if you plan to do a variety of shots that you also use a variety of settings, and so you have different looking shots, maybe like some establishing shots like this one here, maybe some close-ups, all sorts of things. And we can also play around with the camera itself. So I have this camera here. If you go to the settings, like before, we have like a 20mm focal length, which is quite nice to show us pretty much the entire scene. So if you want to play around with that, I usually would select the camera, go in the viewfinder and in the viewport here, press Shift D to copy it, and press Escape right away so that I don't move it. Right now, here, camera 001 is a duplicate and it's selected, but in order to actually move that camera, you have to go here to the scene properties, under camera, select camera 001. And now we're actually moving camera 001. If you go back to camera, you see this one has not been touched. So I want to make sure I save these and make a lot of duplicates so I have different shots. And now I can, for example, just have this camera in a similar starting position, but then, for example, I could go on the properties and say, like, I want to see what this looks like in a 50mm focal length. So we can do a similar shot, but we kind of have a tighter framing. So we can actually, we'll see less of, I don't know, the ceiling and the walls or whatever, but we will get a better look at the scene that goes on here. And that could be good to kind of, I don't know, like simulate like a zoom in, like a dolly, I don't know. Simulate some camera movement if you have this in a deck with like, I don't know, 10 other images. That could be quite nice. We can also, like, if you like this, you can move on to something different. I would usually try to get an initial framing for maybe like a dozen shots like this, because this is going to be more responsive. But of course then once I have decent looking frame, then I would turn on Eevee to see how it looks overall. I was like, okay, this looks pretty good. I can slightly adjust the framing so it looks decent. And then I can, for example, say, okay, this is great. I would also always make sure to check cycles as well, just to see how it looks like. Let's take this, make another copy. So we have camera 002, go on the scene editor, select that. Let's say, okay, I want to get a closer look at this guy. Select it, press numpad period, and now I can rotate around this guy. Let's say I want to get a nice shot of, like, I can get him in the frame. I have my cool looking ceiling, a bit of the light bleeding in here. You see it's a bit dark, I can't really make out his figure. So either what you can do now is play around with the fog, try to separate him from the background, or we can also see like, okay, how does Cycles look like? Because sometimes it can look quite different than Eevee. So I think it's always worth it to have a look. So you see like there's a lot more bounce light. There's less blooming, but we are getting a better view of what this guy looks like here. So now we have like a nice rim light here, and his face overall is brighter. So I can get him like in a good framing, and now I kind of have that shot I like. There's of course still like his silhouette is still getting lost a lot, but again, either you can fix that in 3D here with like some fogging or different kind of framing. Like I can move him around so that he's like right in front of like a lighter area of the ceiling. Like there's like a reflection here. So if you move him here, you can see that now I have a better, I don't like the angle as much, but I have a better rhythm of light to dark to light to dark, to light to dark. So I get a really nice rhythm, and the image becomes very readable. And then of course, what I always would recommend you to do is that we are getting out a pass. If we go to the regular viewport here, click on this one, you can say flat, random, get rid of the outline, and get rid of this one here, the overlays. And now when you say view, viewport, render image, then you can save out this kind of wannabe clown pass kind of thing. It takes basically the object ID and gives every object a random color, so you can later on in Photoshop select these. I've shown this a lot every time, but of course, in case somebody hasn't watched my previous tutorials, I need to mention it. So we can turn this back on. So we have the normal view. So that's a good thing to have. And let's say you have now selected a lot of different frames. You want to, of course, render the image. Click F12 or hit F12 or render image. You also want to probably check that your resolution is your desired resolution, whatever that is for you, whatever is a good mixture of quality and render times if you do Cycles. One thing I would also recommend you to use, especially if you use Cycles and if you use if you don't have like the crazy strongest computer with like 10 graphic cards or whatever, I would highly recommend you to use the denoiser. And you do that by going into here. This only applies to Cycles, by the way. For Eevee, you don't need a denoiser. You go into the view layer properties. You can check on mist as well if you want. Sometimes that's useful. But here, click on denoising data. You need to enable that. And then we go into compositing. We say use nodes. Zoom out a little bit. Let me disconnect this one. Shift A, search denoise. You have that one here. Then you connect the noisy image to the image. Denoising normal to the normal. Denoising albedo to the albedo. And click that one in here. So that's already done. And now every time you render out a frame, there will be, it will automatically compile a composite with the compositor nodes that you have indicated, and then you can save out the denoised image right away. This way it will use the Intel Open Image denoiser, which is vastly superior to the old denoiser that was in here. If you have an RTX card, you have the additional option of using the Optics AI denoiser, which is also very, very good. But in case you don't have that, in case you're like on an older GTX card, or if you're like on a Mac or something different, and you don't have that, the Intel Open Image denoiser is very, very good. And it's built in, and it's free and everything. So now we can render out a lot of frames, and then we'll jump into Photoshop to assemble these together. So in Photoshop now, I prepared, of course, a lot of images to show you and just to quickly cycle through them. There is, I took quite a few of them, different lighting scenarios, sometimes the same shot with just like HDRI enabled or the light wall on, just to show you. So I didn't actually do very much on these images. Let's get rid of that. So this is how the original image looked like. And of course, here is the pass. I just punched up the colors with the levels. It's exactly the same as I showed you. So I can isolate the guy, the pillars, whatever I want. This is the original image. You see how dark it is. I did that with Cycles. Here is a bit of a mist, the mist path. The mist pass, I just pumped up a little bit and set it onto a screen, 12%, but I made it a bit of a yellow tinge so that you can see that I punched out the guy a little bit, added a bit of light bleed here using the screen layer and pressing G, the gradient tool with a radial gradient. So I'll just pick a color and then add this and just do it very, very minor. And then I add a few like a bit of like dust here. I usually have these purchased from some website where they have like camera dust and some light bleed. Here also some like lens flares or whatever. I don't take the time to actually reproduce these faithfully in Photoshop. I just buy them and then throw them in there if they feel appropriate. So I just put it here because that area felt a bit like it could use something. And again, more light bleed here with a color dodge layer. So you see, I didn't really do anything else to the image other than that. If you look at this here, so usually what I like to do is that sometimes the image, when it comes out of the denoiser, is too clean. So in addition to having the cleaned up image, I take the grainy image, the original before the denoiser. You're also able to save that out and put it on a 20% layer just on top of it. So I have a little bit of grain just to dirty it up a bit. This one is again the mist pass, set to 13% screen and just tinged a bit like whatever the light color is in your image. So it's in this case like orangey yellowish. Again, I put the camera dirt in there. Again, I purchased these, so I'm not allowed to just give you these files for free. A bit of light bleed here and there, so the image is not that perfectly clean and evenly exposed. Usually with 3D, you have to just kind of dirty it up a little bit, just to get rid of this completely 3D clean effect. Some more strange, I don't know, as if the light gets trapped in your virtual camera and bounces around a little bit and gives us some aberrations or light flares or whatever. And here's some localized light bleed so that maybe it feels like the light in some areas is stronger than in others. Just all little irregularities that help break up the evenness of the scene. So here, that is the scene with the HDRI. So you see it's very dark. But also here you can see hopefully that the noisy image produced a lot of fireflies, as they're called here, and therefore was unusable. So I got rid of it completely. Again, we have the mist, some light bleed here, some dust on the lens, screen layer. And here I put like a bigger lens flare in there just to get a bit more. I wanted to get some of that bluish purple color shine into the room, and so took like a blue lens flare and put that in there. And here I isolated some of the pillars with a magic wand selection tool and added a bit of distance fog. As you can see here, a bit of distance fog behind it, just to separate some of these pillars. And then you do that again and again and again. So you see like a darker image. Let's see if we have a different shot. Yeah, here we have a different shot where I zoomed in a little bit, like I showed you, with a different focal length. Added some different streaks of lens flares on it. It's sometimes a bit cheesy, but sometimes it feels quite nice if you want to go for that feel overall. You see here I took these streaks out. And here's that similar shot that I showed you just now. You can see how I really punched up the background here. So this was the original, and you can see how his silhouette again is getting lost. But here I have I basically isolated him with the ID pass, and then just added like like a screen layer behind him just to punch him out. Some dust, some flares, a bit of again a little bit of light irregularities, just to have some blooming going on here and there. All these things, all these localized things that you cannot really do efficiently in 3D. Here are some shots that are just showing more the architecture of the place, and that are kind of supplement shots for like our main shot. I would take this as like the main establishing, and then we have here some like an alternate like a zoomed in version, and then we have like a close up of the guy. I mean, for in this case, it's not like he's like fancily designed or anything. He's just a stock model. But if you have like a cool designed character, it would be great to like show him closer in the environment you built. Either from the front or like from the bottom right here. It was important that I could show the character and the silhouette, and also like some of the environment. If the environment is not so important, then maybe you can throw it out of focus. You can make it like blurry, and then you just have the character sharp in the foreground. That could also be cool. So here's another kind of supporting shot to show more of the architecture, but instead of it just being like a plain ugly shot, you could make it look nicer and really play up the materials and the drama of this shot. Here's like an upwards shot, so you can really see the ceiling. Would be great to and you can see the ceiling, and you also want to get the character in for scale. So it would be cool if this could be like animated or whatever, and this is like flowing and moving in the wind or something. That could be like really cool, if you could imagine that. If you're really proficient, you can probably animate that as well, but I have no idea how to do that. I'm just kind of going off on a tangent here based on what I did. I wanted to keep this in because I don't think it's a very successful shot. But it's not like every shot you select is like a masterful shot. Like sometimes I take some shots and I already know in 3D that they're not going to work, but I keep them anyway. And for this one, I was like, okay, let's see if you can do anything out of that. So I kept it, rendered it out, and put it together. But I was like, okay, maybe it's not going to work. Maybe I would have to put more time into it, like replace the ground and everything, because the 3D texture is too obvious here. But I thought it was good to show you that, I mean, you have to really select your best shots, and sometimes it's not going to be, every shot is going to be masterful. Here I wanted to make like a close-up of the ship. It's not fully designed, there's a lot of things missing, but I thought it would be cool to have like, it maybe like fly by. And maybe another close-up of this ship. Again, there's nothing crazy in there. Just some graphic elements. I added some quick paint over for the for the landing gear. Oh, I copied the foreground here to cover up all this messiness. A bit of distance fog, and then the usual lens stuff. Some color dodge to glow the lights here. More lens flares, of course. Can be a good way to cover up that you haven't fully designed the ship. Because the ship is not really the main focus of this tutorial, and it's just kind of like a supporting shot to see if it works. So you can go off later and fully design this ship if you want. But for that, you can maybe refer back to one of my other tutorials where I take the whole ship, where I show you the whole design of a ship like that. Okay, that's it for the Photoshop file. You can take it apart and see what I did there. Thank you so much for joining me for this tutorial, and I'll hopefully see you in the next one.